Officer James was tired. The 12-hour shift weighed heavily on his shoulders as he walked along Madison Street. The night was cool, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. All he could think about was his warm bed. But then he noticed the sound of tapping paws behind him. A scruffy little puppy was following him, its brown fur matted and dirty. James waved dismissively, "Go home," but the dog simply tilted its head and continued to follow him. After several blocks, James stopped. The puppy froze mid-step, watching him with big, attentive eyes. James sighed. "Listen, buddy, I can't help you. I'm not even allowed to have pets in my building." But the dog sat down, wagging its tail tentatively, and stared at him with an intensity James couldn't ignore. He knelt down, reaching out his hand. "It's okay, I won't hurt you." As he got closer, he noticed a worn collar with a crumpled note attached. He carefully pulled out the paper and unfolded it. The messy, childlike handwriting made his heart skip a beat. "Help! My brother is sick. No food, no water. Apartment 3B. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this." The fatigue fell away as his heart began to race. He looked at the puppy, who was now wagging its tail excitedly. Without hesitation, James took off running, the dog bounding beside him, leading him through the dark streets. The apartment complex was run down, peeling paint, broken windows, a shattered front door hanging crookedly on its hinges. Inside, the neon light flickered eerily on the dirty walls, and the musty smell of neglect hung in the air. James took the stairs two at a time, the puppy hurrying ahead. They stopped at door 3B. James knocked firmly. Silence. He knocked again, louder. Still no response. The puppy's whining grew more urgent. James didn't hesitate. With a powerful kick, he broke the door open. The stench of decay hit him. In the dark corner of the room, a small boy, no older than 6, was huddled, his thin arms wrapped around a bundle. James felt his stomach tighten. The boy flinched, pulling the bundle closer. His eyes were wide in his gaunt face, his lips cracked, his clothes hanging loosely. The baby in his arms was unnaturally still, its face flushed with fever. "Hey," James said softly, slowly lowering himself to the floor. "I'm Officer James. I'm here to help." The boy pressed himself further into the wall, his whole body trembling. But then the puppy jumped forward, wagging its tail and licking the boy's face. The rigid expression on his face began to crack, tears welling up in his eyes. He loosened his grip on the baby, cautiously reaching out a hand to stroke the puppy's soft fur. James pulled out his phone. "I need an ambulance now. 2 malnourished children, 1 severely dehydrated." As he spoke, his eyes scanned the apartment. The kitchen cabinet was wide open, empty. The fridge held a single carton of spoiled milk. A bare mattress lay in the corner, next to a dirty crib. His jaw tightened. A crumpled paper lay on the floor. James smoothed it out and read, "We can't do this anymore. No money, no jobs. We'll find help and come back. Take care of your brother. Be strong." His grip on the paper tightened. This wasn't just desperation. This was abandonment. They had left these children to fend for themselves. The baby's whimper snapped him out of his thoughts. He turned to the older boy. "We're going to get you to safety, okay?" The boy looked at him, his face full of uncertainty and fear. But he nodded weakly. Sirens wailed in the distance. The puppy placed its paw on the boy's knee, as if to say everything would be okay. James knew nothing could undo this betrayal, but he would make sure these children were never left alone again. James watched as the paramedics tended to the baby, their worried whispers and frantic movements leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. The older boy, whom James now knew as Noah, clung to his sleeve, his eyes fixed on his brother. "Is he going to die?" he whispered. James knelt down to look him in the eye. "The doctors are really good at their jobs. They'll do their best, I promise." As the stretcher with the baby was wheeled into the ambulance, Noah stayed close to James, clutching him desperately as if afraid he'd be left alone again. "I'm coming with you, okay?" James said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder as they climbed into the ambulance together. The puppy jumped in after them, sitting close to Noah's legs, never taking its eyes off him. The ride to the hospital was quiet, interrupted only by the beeping of medical equipment. James could feel Noah's small fingers gripping his sleeve. The boy looked like he was battling a sea of emotions, unable to keep control. "Are you hungry?" James asked gently. Noah shook his head, but his stomach growled loudly. James pulled a granola bar from his pocket and handed it to him. Hesitantly, Noah took it and began to eat slowly. At the hospital, the children were immediately attended to. Doctors rushed through the halls, voices murmuring medical terms James didn't fully understand. He held Noah's hand as a nurse carefully examined his thin arm. "Malnourished, dehydrated, but stable," she said. "He just needs food, fluids, and some rest." Then the social workers arrived, two women in dark clothing, their faces professional but kind. James could feel Noah stiffen as they approached. "Noah, my name is Sarah Brooks. I'm a social worker, and I need to ask you a few questions," she said gently. "We need to make sure you and your brother are safe." Noah scooted closer to James, his fingers digging deeper into his sleeve. The puppy stood in front of him, as if to protect him. James saw the struggle in the boy's eyes. He had been let down by too many adults, and his fear of being taken away again was palpable. James made a decision. "I want to take care of the children," he said firmly. The two women exchanged surprised glances. "Officer Peterson, that's a big step. There are procedures, screenings, paperwork." "I know," James interrupted calmly, "but I can give them a home. They don't need another temporary solution." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It's not impossible, but it will take time. In the meantime, we'll need to find temporary placement." "No." Noah's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it was full of fear. James felt the boy's small hand clutching him desperately. "I don't want to go." James knelt down again. "Don't worry, little guy. I won't leave you alone." Sarah sighed and closed her clipboard. "We'll look into your options, Officer Peterson, but for today, Noah can stay with you. He needs someone he can trust." James nodded gratefully. Noah looked at him as if he could hardly believe what he was hearing. "You're really staying?" James placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Noah. I'm staying." When they arrived at James's house later that night, Noah was quiet. He held his little brother in the car seat and followed James hesitantly inside. The puppy trotted behind them, as if it too knew this was an important moment. James showed Noah around the house, the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom. "You can eat whenever you want," he explained, opening the fridge, which was stocked with fresh food. Noah's eyes widened slightly, but his face remained expressionless. "This is your room," James said finally, opening the door to a small cozy space with a bunk bed and a nightlight. "You can choose which bed you want." Noah stood silently in the doorway, clutching Lucas's car seat as if it were the only thing keeping him safe. Finally, he sat down on the floor, pulling his knees to his chest, and the puppy curled up protectively beside him. James watched him for a moment before sighing and walking away. Noah would need time, but he wasn't alone anymore. The morning sun cast a soft light through the windows as James walked into the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. He heard light footsteps behind him and turned to see Noah standing in the doorway, the puppy close by his side. The boy looked tired, but his eyes were alert. "Morning, buddy," James said gently. "Are you hungry?" Noah shrugged but said nothing. James slid a plate of toast and scrambled eggs across the table. "Eat as much as you want. There's plenty here for you." Hesitantly, Noah sat down and began to eat slowly. James pretended not to watch, but he noticed Noah glancing at him repeatedly, as if testing him. After Lucas woke up and was fed, James decided it was time to get some things for the children. "We need to do some shopping. Think you can help me pick out some stuff for you and your brother?" Noah didn't answer, but he nodded almost imperceptibly. At the mall, Noah was noticeably quiet as James bought baby food and diapers for Lucas. He followed James with his head down, only looking up uncertainly when they reached the clothing section. "You can pick whatever you want," James encouraged. Noah hesitated, his fingers brushing lightly over the fabrics of the displayed sweaters. Finally, he reached for a dark blue hoodie that was slightly too big for him. "That looks good," James said with a smile. "Want anything else?" Noah shook his head, clutching the hoodie tightly. James decided to give him time. He would learn that he was safe here. After the shopping, they returned home. James had already set up a small crib for Lucas and placed some toys in Noah's room. But when he checked on the children that evening, He found Noah not in his bed, but curled up on the floor, the puppy cuddled close to him. James felt his heart ache. Without a word, he fetched a blanket and gently laid it over the boy. The next day, James's phone rang. It was Sarah, the social worker. "We've prepared some paperwork. If you're serious about becoming their foster father, we'll need to go through some steps." James was already resolved. "I'll do whatever it takes." Noah stood in the doorway listening. When James hung up, he stepped closer. "Do I have to leave?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. James knelt down to him. "No, Noah. I'll stay with you and Lucas as long as you want me to." Noah studied him for a long moment, then, for the first time, hesitantly placed a hand on James's sleeve. It wasn't a hug or grand words, but it was a start. James knew trust wasn't built overnight, but this small moment meant more than 1,000 promises. The days passed and slowly Noah began to adjust to his new life. He still spoke little, but his eyes no longer looked so distrustful. The puppy, whom he had named Hero, never left his side. James often watched him when he thought no one was looking. How Noah secretly set aside small pieces of food for Hero. How he adjusted the blanket at night before going to sleep himself. One afternoon, they sat together in the living room while Lucas slept in his crib. James placed a photo album on the table. "These are pictures of my family," he explained. "Want to take a look?" Noah shrugged, but as James opened the first page, he scooted closer. There were pictures of James as a child, of his parents, of his dog. Noah ran his fingers over a photo of James as a boy with a dog by his side. "That's Max," James said. "He was my best friend." Noah was silent, but James saw the slight twitch of his lips. It was the first time he showed real interest. Later that evening, as James was washing the dishes, he heard Noah's voice. "Can we give Hero a bath?" The question was so unexpected that James paused before smiling. "Of course. Let's get everything ready." It was a small thing, a dog bath, but to James it felt like a huge step. Noah was beginning to feel safe. The road was still long, but James knew they were on the right path. The weeks passed, and Noah began to settle in. He still spoke little, but he moved through the house with more confidence, as if it belonged to him. James noticed that Noah sometimes stared out the window, as if expecting someone to return. But no one came. The social workers hadn't found the boy's parents yet, and the quiet routine continued. Breakfast in the mornings, Noah helping with Lucas, afternoon walks with Hero, quiet evenings by the fireplace. One day, James had to work late and arrange for a babysitter. When he returned home, Noah had fallen asleep on the couch. Hero curled up beside him. James felt a strange tug in his chest, a feeling he hadn't had in a long time. He gently covered the boy with a blanket. The following week, James received a call from Sarah. "We have news about the boy's parents." James's stomach tightened. "Can we meet?" They arranged a meeting for the next day. Noah sat on the kitchen chair as James carefully broke the news. "They've found your parents." The boy froze, his fingers clawing into the fabric of his sleeve. "They want to see you." Noah said nothing, but his face turned pale. James saw the fear in his eyes. "You don't have to if you don't want to." The words hung in the air. Finally, Noah whispered, "I don't know what to do." The next day came faster than expected. They drove to the agency together. Hero wasn't allowed inside. Noah held Lucas tightly as they entered the waiting room. There stood two people who had once been his parents. The mother looked tired. The father avoided Noah's gaze. "Noah," the mother began hesitantly, "we're sorry." Noah said nothing. The minutes dragged on, and James could feel the boy pressing closer to him. Finally, Noah took a deep, shaky breath and said quietly, "Why did you leave?" Silence. The answer never really came, just vague excuses that brought no relief. When they were back in the car, Noah looked out the window. "Do we have to go back?" His voice was smaller than usual. James shook his head. "Not if you don't want to." Noah was silent for a moment, then said, "I want to stay." James placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll stay together." The days passed and Noah grew quieter, but his pensiveness remained. He didn't ask about his parents, but James knew he was brooding over the meeting. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Noah suddenly asked, "Do you think they ever really loved us?" James looked at him for a moment. I think some people don't know how to love, he answered honestly. But love isn't just about word, it's about actions. And you get to decide what love means to you. Noah nodded slowly, running his fingers through Hero's fur. I think I know what it means now. The following weeks were full of changes. James prepared the necessary paperwork for a potential adoption, while Noah began to feel more comfortable at school. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. One day Noah came home from school holding a handmade drawing. Without a word, he handed it to James. James looked at the picture. It was a simple drawing of him, Noah, Lucas, and Hero. Above their heads in big letters, it read, "My family." James blinked against the sudden moisture in his eyes. He carefully placed the drawing on the fridge and pulled Noah into a gentle hug. "Yes, Noah," he whispered, "we are a family." A few days later, there was a knock at the door. James opened it to find Sarah standing there with a folder in her hand. "We need to discuss a few things," she said. "The final steps for the adoption." James felt his heart race. "Of course, come in." As they sat down and Sarah spread out the documents, Noah lingered in the doorway. "What's that?" he asked quietly. Sarah smiled gently at him. "These are the papers that could make James your official guardian, if that's what you want." Noah looked at James, his eyes wide and searching. "Really?" James nodded. "It's your decision, Noah." The boy was silent for a long time, his hands nervously playing with the hem of his sleeve. Then he stepped forward and carefully placed his small hand on the paper. "I want to," he whispered. Sarah handed him a pen. "Sign here." With trembling fingers, Noah guided the pen over the paper. When he was done, James placed a hand on his shoulder. "This means you're officially part of my family." Noah looked at him with wide eyes, then, for the first time, threw himself into James's arms. "Thank you," he whispered. James held him tightly. "Thank you for trusting me." The weeks passed and life at James's house began to normalize. Noah grew bolder, speaking more and slowly embracing the life James offered. Hero never left his side, and Lucas thrived under his big brother's loving care. But James knew the final step was still ahead, the day they would officially become a family. The morning of the hearing arrived. Noah was quieter than usual, his gaze often distant. James recognized the uncertainty in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked gently as they got ready for the courthouse. Noah nodded, but his fingers trembled slightly as he buttoned his shirt. "What if they say no?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. James knelt in front of him. "They won't, but no matter what happens, I'm here. I'll always be here." In the courtroom, they sat side by side. Lucas slept peacefully in James's arms, and Hero waited outside with a caretaker. The judge, a friendly older woman with warm eyes, looked directly at Noah. "Noah, do you want Officer James to be your legal father?" Noah held his breath, his gaze shifting to James, who gave him an encouraging smile. Then he turned back to the judge. "Yes," he said firmly, "I want him to be my dad." The ruling was a formality, but as the judge signed the papers, James felt a wave of relief wash over him. Noah looked at him, searching, as if to make sure this was really happening. Then, completely unexpectedly, he threw himself into James's arms. "Thank you," he whispered against James's shoulder. "Thank you for not sending me away." James swallowed hard and held him tightly. "Thank you for trusting me." As they left the building, Noah held James's hand as if it were his safest anchor in the world. Hero jumped up joyfully as they stepped outside, as if he too knew they were now truly a family. When they got home, a surprise awaited Noah. Sarah and some of the neighbors had organized a small welcome party. There was cake, balloons, and a banner that read, "Welcome home, Noah." The boy turned red, but his smile was radiant. That evening, as the house grew quiet again, Noah sat on the couch with Hero. James joined him, placing an arm around his shoulders. "Are you happy, buddy?" he asked softly. Noah leaned into him. "Yeah, I think I am." James smiled and gave him a gentle squeeze. "Then this is really your home. Forever." Noah nodded and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly safe. The days passed, and life in their little family grew more familiar. Noah developed new routines. He made Lucas laugh in the mornings, helped James cook, and began regularly training with Hero. James noticed that Noah smiled more often, his gaze no longer clouded by uncertainty. One day, Noah came into the living room with a book. "Can you read this to me?" he asked quietly. James took the book and sat down with him on the couch. It was a small gesture, but to James it meant everything. The weeks flew by, and soon Christmas was approaching. James let Noah help pick out the tree. They decorated it together with colorful lights and handmade ornaments. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the fireplace while Lucas played with wrapping paper. Noah suddenly looked at James. "Christmas used to be just another day, but now it feels different." James placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because we're a family." Noah smiled. "Yeah, a real family." In that moment, James knew they had made it. They had created a home where everyone felt safe and loved. And for Noah, this was now truly the place he belonged, forever. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Thanks to our valued viewers, we continue to improve every day. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up.